This is a chapter review for Vinland Saga 218, Thousand Year Voyage, Part 27. We had a break last month, so let's go over my previous expectations. Last chapter set us up for what I believe to be the final climactic confrontation for the Thousand Year Voyage arc here. I believe that Einar would be used to present the antithesis of the story, the pessimistic acceptance of violence as something unavoidable, and the refusal to choose a total unfair selflessness that forces you to lose in order to protect your own enemies when they would not do the same for you. The logical refutation of everything Thorfinn and Vinland Saga represents. Although an agreement between the two parties did seem possible to me, I still lean towards further violence, absolutely. With Einar's mental state, Styrk's vendetta against Gauki, and Vargar's men readying an attack on his order, it seemed very likely to me that some kind of intense situation would lead to one of those fuses igniting. With the Gippi tribe potentially coming to help with the wounded as well, I worried that violence would begin, and as I've been talking about for so many chapters, that the Gippi tribe would become unwillingly caught in that violence, despite them having always just wanted peace with the Nords. So, with that all being said, let's get into the big confrontation. Thorfinn faces Einar and Styrk. Peace is on the line. His companions look on. Everybody fears the worst. Einar steps up to Thorfinn. His expression drained completely. His eyes stained red. Thorfinn looks closely at his brother and furrows his brow. He can see it all. He knows this pain all too well. You killed a man, Einar. Next to Einar stands the man he killed. The weight of that single hand on his shoulder is crushing. Einar asks if Thorfinn can see it, and Thorfinn confirms. But Einar isn't surprised. Of course, with all Thorfinn has gone through, he would be able to tell. And now, Einar finally understands himself. Styrk looks on, confused. He came down the ladder with Einar, but suddenly, in only a few words, they've become worlds apart. Einar continues, forever living with the burden of having killed a person. It's just too much for him. Thorfinn can do nothing but softly say Einar's name. He knows this pain all too well. He wished nobody he loved would ever have to share it with him. But Styrk speaks up. If you hadn't killed him, you'd have been killed. Don't fuss about it. This is war, Einar. You only did what you had to do. You decided to fight, didn't you? Kind of late to get all shaky now. Did you have any other choice but fighting? Einar hears this excuse, and God, does he want it so badly. But he just can't help but admit the reality he sees. When Thorfinn saw the new army, he decided to evacuate. But Einar decided to fight. Still, he begins to slip into the comfort of this sentiment, desperate to lift this weight he now shoulders. I had no choice. I didn't have a choice. They were attacking. Even without fighting, I couldn't give up on Arnade's village. I wanted to protect this village. What's wrong with that? I was right. Say I was right. I had no choice, right, Thorfinn? Cordelia hears these words, no choice, and thinks back to Carly's question. Did they really have no choice? Einar just looks at Thorfinn. He needs to hear his answer. He needs to understand his way out of this pain, and Thorfinn is the only one he knows can guide him there. Everyone looks on. What will Thorfinn say? Thorfinn speaks. Even if now I told you were right, the weight of the death you struggle under would not vanish. Einar still looks at him. The pain is not gone, but in his eyes we see a glimmer that was not there before. Thorfinn continues, I too bear the weight of that death. That is all I can do for you, brother. Einar pauses for a moment and says, I see. I finally understand what you were always saying about a war of no choice. Between it's wrong and no choice, how far can you get without choosing between the two? You're amazing. You really are a true warrior. Finally, fully understanding the significance of Thorfinn's oath on Ketil's farm, the weight he had been bearing and the strength it took to continue climbing with it, Einar knows what must be done. Let's declare a truce. You are right, Thorfinn. The reactions from the remaining Nords are mixed. Uncertainty, shock, anger, simply too exhausted to bother. On the shoulder opposite of Einar's victim, Thorfinn places his hand. The weight cannot be lifted, but it can be shared. Earnestly, Thorfinn thanks Einar for his resolve, then turns to Styrk, expressing his regrets, but asking that he accept the truce as well. Styrk's face is shrouded in shadow by his helmet, remaining silent, causing Thorfinn to pause. At the same time, Gauki asks Niska to explain, and with a surprised relief in her expression, she explains how the Nords have agreed on a truce. Wanting to solidify that deal, Gauki suggests they promise to guarantee the Nords' safety, even adding that they could take some food as a parting gift. At this point, Gauki has no reason to want the fighting to continue. These promises are a small expense when weighed against all he has personally gained to this point. His rivals are dead. He has claimed a powerful weapon that will continue to solidify his position, and all he needs now is for the Norse to leave without having to put his men at risk. As always, Gauki knows how to take a fight. He will win, and he knows how to send his rivals into fights they will lose. However, Gauki has one problem he is not anticipating, as Styrk's gaze remains locked on him. Thorfinn tries to speak to Styrk, but his words fall on deaf ears. Gauki turns around, and Styrk sees his opportunity for revenge. Styrk charges forward, reaching for a knife under his cloak. Are you shitting me, you cowards? If we're defeated, it means that Ivar and Ganglati died in vain. How can I accept that? Ivar's final order to Styrk, to step up and be strong for his people, for his brothers, is one that Styrk intends to fulfill. Thorfinn quickly turns to stop him, but his wound shoots pain through his body. He cannot move fast enough. Gauki turns, but there's not enough time. Styrk is already bringing the knife down on him. He will not have a truce with this monster. However, another hand reaches desperately for peace. Styrk is pulled back onto the ground, his knife narrowly missing its target. Einar holds tightly onto Styrk's cloak. He intends to fight the true battle. Thorfinn calls out to him as Hild readies her aim. Hild warns Thorfinn she will shoot Styrk. Even in this moment, she puts her trust in his judgment. Thorfinn, searching for the path to de-escalation, begins to ask Hild to hold on, but his words drift off as the knife plunges down once more. Relentless in his pursuit, Styrk stabs the knife into Einar's neck, a spray of blood shooting out as the knife is removed. Thorfinn looks on in complete horror. His dream of peace in Vinland has taken a further toll, an absolute nightmare. Hild fires as Styrk manages back to his feet, the bolt now in his side, not doing enough to prevent his next move. Styrk rushes his target once more. However, the blade has already been drawn. In an explosion of power and blood, Styrk's head is cleaved off his shoulders by the very sword his brother insisted would protect them. Finally, Styrk's helmet leaves his head, but both unceremoniously roll away from his falling body before we can see his face. The remaining Nords on the wall, seeing their ally executed, draw their bows in a panic. However, carrying that same desperate desire for peace, Vargar delivers a powerful command. Think! The men turn to him. If you shoot that Olnu, the truce will end. Think well about that. Think about what it was that Einar risked his life for. If you want to continue the fighting, shoot him. Every man should decide for himself. The men lower their bows. With the potential for peace so volatile, Vargar managed to keep a cool head when it mattered most. Thorfinn comes to Einar's side, holding him in his arms. Einar, you're okay, brother. It's just a small cut on your neck. It's not nearly enough to kill you. Thorfinn's denial is not enough to stop the flow of blood. A tear rolls down Einar's face. His voice quivers. Thorfinn, I killed a man. What would Arnheid think if I see her? He chose to fight for Arnheid, to not lose her again, but in the face of death, he cannot bear to face her. Niska says she'll try to heal him, asking Hild to bring both of them. The possibility of that hope remaining impossibly slim. Thorfinn looks down at his brother and cries his name. The tears fall like rain. In the end, due to everyone's desperate efforts and the choices they were willing to make, neither the Nords nor the Olnu loosed their arrows. Yet, the price paid for that peace is the blood of a true warrior, a dark stain on the white snow. And that is the end of the chapter. Wow, there's a lot to talk about. But let's begin with Einar's conversation with Thorfinn. Possibly the most shocking part of this chapter for me, to be honest. Where myself, and I'm sure most others, saw a despair that would spiral into further violence on Einar's face, Thorfinn immediately saw something else. The unbearable weight of death and the plea to have that weight lifted somehow. This was, in my opinion, an excellent twist from Yukimura. Einar began in the direction I anticipated, just desperately trying to reason that he had no choice, to find some relief in that justification. But Einar recognizes the reality that when Thorfinn chose evacuation, he chose to fight. Regardless of what came next and the choices he could have made from there, he knows he made this choice, and he cannot deny it for the sake of comfort. He can only beg that Thorfinn clear that doubt from his mind. But Thorfinn recognized what Einar really needed, or at least the only real thing he could give him. Not a lecture about peace, nor the affirmation that he was right in doing what he did, simply empathy and understanding. Thorfinn is not so naive as to say that people can't be forced into entirely unfair situations that can bring the act of violence to even the most well-intentioned people. He will not cast judgment on Einar for doing so. He does not think himself that holier than thou. All he can do is feel Einar's pain and offer his hand in carrying that weight with him, because nothing will undo what's already been done. Instead, they must focus entirely on what they can do now, the choice they have before them to lessen the burden they must carry going forward. So, as the light of the true warrior comes to his eyes here in the second panel, you get this shine that you'd see in Thorfinn's eyes and Thor's eyes. It's restored to him. And because of that, he is able to choose peace. He's able to choose a truce. He recognizes the strength it takes to stop the violence, and he finds that strength in himself too. Now let's talk about Styrk's revenge. With Styrk's final moments here, I think I reflect on why people choose to seek revenge for the people they love who fall in battle. It isn't simply for the self-gratification or a lust for blood. It's the fear of allowing the end of a life to be worthless. Because the end of a life is just inherently a bad thing. We recognize the loss of a life as this inherently painful and tragic thing, especially when it is happening to somebody you care about. And having to grapple with the fact that there's no greater purpose or meaning to it is incredibly difficult. Styrk is still a smart man. He knows the deaths of his brothers are the result of a war they helped start, and he knows that renders their deaths pointless. But regardless of how smart he is, his emotions cannot allow him to accept the weight of that reality. He does not have the strength to bear it and see death for what it is. Instead, faced with a weight not too unlike the weight Einar faces, he can only chase relief in revenge and victory. So he might look back and fool himself into believing his brothers sacrificed themselves for a purpose, an illusion he is desperate to see. And so, between these two men who carry these heavy burdens of death, only one finds the resolve to shoulder the reality before him and begin his climb towards peace, while the other loses his head. Briefly, I want to talk about Vargar's order here as well. This was kind of the final looming threat of violent escalation after Styrk, Vargar's plan. And it nearly does bring everything crashing down right here. But just like Einar, Vargar recognizes the choice before him and refuses to allow his men to be the reason they lose this battle against violence. He still leaves it to them. If they truly want to continue fighting, they can decide that. But he knows nobody truly wants this. Now let's talk about Einar's fate. As I've been pointing out for a few chapters now, Einar's choices and actions echoed ideas of both Gardar and Kettle. But this chapter crucially shows how Einar is not those men. Einar had to kill, and the weight of that pain is a truly heavy burden on his kind heart. Unlike Gardar, he won't spiral into a cyclical violence for Arneid's sake. He will recognize that she would not want that for him. Unlike Kettle, he will not perpetuate a conflict that will only result in further devastation because of his shallowness. Instead, he will be a true warrior. He will choose peace, despite the consequences it will bring him. In the end, he thinks to Arneid, to his choice to fight for her sake, sobered to the reality that this pain is the last thing she would have wanted him to endure. But with Niska's offer to heal here, I do think Einar's fate remains in the air. Let's talk about some overall thoughts. This chapter absolutely blew me away, completely pivoting against my predictions, yet still capitalizing on the exact pieces of setup that I spotted, so it does not feel dissatisfying at all. Every crucial point of pressure that almost promised violence last chapter was resolved in this chapter, each kept under control by incredibly strong resolve from all of our characters. And in that way, this chapter is a reminder that regardless of what has already happened, you will come to a time where you have a choice, and it is crucial that you do not miss it. Thorfinn chose to empathize with Einar. Einar chose a truce and to reach out his hand in desperation to maintain it. Vargar chose to command his men to think. Even when Styrk failed to make the right choice for himself, everyone else recognized these slim opportunities for peace and narrowly avoided the worst outcome. With that justification of having no choice, the pessimism of accepting violence as inevitable, as I did in predicting how this chapter would go, any of these moments could have been missed. Also, let's real quick talk about art this chapter. Oh my god. This is possibly one of the best displays of Yukimura's talents in a long time. I have loved the art in this arc, but this chapter was next level. Character expressions were varied and incredibly detailed, with so many impactful moments like Einar's plea here to be told he's right. And as always, the violence was explosive and shocking. The panel of Styrk's head getting cleaved off was especially breathtaking. Yukimura is extremely skilled at depicting powerful motion like this. And the final panels of Einar were especially haunting. His pained and broken expression here as he stains the whole top panel with blood will stick with me forever. So with all that, let's talk about next chapter predictions. And I think two questions really hang in the air. Is this it for Einar? And is this it for the Vinland arc? For Einar, I don't think he is entirely gone yet, but I do not think he's going to last much longer. I believe next chapter he will die here in Vinland and be buried with the Arnheid statue. Before that though, I think we will be given some time for closure for both him and us. What I'm most interested in seeing though is what Thorfinn will say to him. When Arnheid was dying, Thorfinn told her of the promise of Vinland, the hope for a place without war and slavery, where she could live in peace. Now, with that Vinland no longer existing, with it never truly existing, what does Thorfinn say to comfort his dying brother? What hope can he give him? I believe we'll also see Einar get his moment of seeing Arnheid like he talks about at the end of this chapter. And I do hope that despite everything he's done, she will bring him a sense of peace. Honestly, I desperately want Einar to live. I want all of these characters to live, but I feel it's time. Now for the Vinland arc as a whole, we could potentially be in the falling action now, heading towards an epilogue. Currently, there's no reason for further war. Nobody wants to fight anymore on either side. Gauki wants the Norse to evacuate, and the Norse themselves have chosen to evacuate, with the last remaining instigator in Styrk now dead, so this really could be it. Still, part of me is hesitant. while this certainly isn't a happy ending, it did work out much better than I expected. The Gippy tribe never got sucked into the violence, which I felt was certain to happen. The Norse aren't getting completely wiped out in Vinland. Also, some character arcs like Cordelia's, Bug-Eyes', Misekpeque's, and even Hild's to some extent feel like they haven't really reached their end yet. These may very well get wrapped up in a post-war Vinland, but I feel like the presence of violence was an important part of the picture for each of them. Again, especially Cordelia. This chapter does have an air of finality to it though, and Einar's critical choice should be allowed to carry the weight it deserves. So perhaps I've overestimated what's being done with these plot points. That's certainly possible. And I don't think these character arcs not going in the direction I particularly wanted will guarantee that I don't like the ending. I still have complete faith in the ending, regardless of whether or not those are covered. So I'm very eager to see if this really is going to be the end, and if it does end up being the end of the Vinland arc, then we're actually in for a pretty sizable epilogue, considering we probably have at least 7 chapters left to round out Volume 30. But if I can be certain of anything, it is that despite my confidence in my interpretation of the overall goal of this final arc and where we're ultimately heading, the twists and turns getting there have been truly unpredictable since the war began, and that trend can certainly continue through this final volume. But we'll have to see what direction things go in next chapter. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you then. Bye.